This is a graphic produced by an activist group called Gendered Intelligence. They use this graphic to attempt to convince sporting national governing bodies that inclusion of biological men, trans women, into a physical contest is largely not unfair. The purple graph represents all men playing sport, the blue line all women. Their point is that in average athletes, the bulk, there is overlap between men and women. You'll have some women better than some men, inarguably true. And if you just think of everyone in the middle as some big homogeneous blob, then you may be taken in by this. But make no mistake, this graphic is dishonest sleight of hand, a con trick aimed at people looking for any justification to not upset an apple cart. As the head of an international sporting body said recently, we have to balance fairness and inclusion. Implicit in this statement is the recognition that giving in to inclusion of trans women results in unfairness. There is thus a receptiveness to any sleight of hand that allows them to justify this stance. Initially, let's focus on this elite portion of the graph. When you look at it in a low resolution, zoomed out macro sense, it looks like there's almost no difference between men and women at elite level. The argument is that this small difference in ability does not justify exclusion of trans women. But if we zoom in and take a higher resolution view, the picture changes hugely. To analyse this in the zoomed out macro sense is like drawing a graph in maths or science at school and using the wrong scale. You'll miss clear trends which you'll see clearly when the correct honest scale is used. So let's add to this part of the graph some context. Initially, we've added the fastest man and woman over 100 metres who've ever lived. We can see a difference, but let's add further context. Between Bolt and Flojo, we also have Johan Blake, Asa Pau, and so on. Indeed, if we look at IAAF records which stop being listed for men at 10.3 seconds, there are 128 men who have run this time. And in between 10.3 seconds and Bolt's world record, there are over 1,900 men. No one knows how many men have run faster than Flojo, but slower than 10.3 seconds. But it's undoubtedly thousands and thousands. So when we have context, higher resolution and an honest scale, we can see the reality of precisely how unfair the inclusion of biological males in female sport is. Thousands and thousands of men have run faster than the fastest woman who ever lived. Consider the potential consequences of inclusion of biological men into women's sport. Even one good but not great male transitioning into a trans woman would entirely obliterate the achievement of the greatest female sprinter to ever live, and it would by definition downgrade the achievements of every female sprinter competing today. To add further context, the top 5 boys in the US National High School Track and Field Championship all ran faster than the fastest woman of all time. Now let's go back and look at the overall graphic again, and this time specifically this portion in the middle. The bulk area, the area where the vast majority of mainstream sporting participation takes place. Bear in mind this is still competitive sport, not leisure. If we zoom in again, we just see this big homogeneous overlapping blob. But sport at any level isn't organised like that. Sport is organised in divisions, leagues, etc. It's hierarchical and meritocratic, and this, lest we ever forget, is to ensure an equal playing field, fairness, and an opportunity to compete against people of a very similar level of innate natural ability to you. And when we add that context to the graph, we see the situation at higher resolution, and it becomes clear that this is far from a homogeneous overlapping lump of generic people. We can see how league and competitive level is hierarchically structured, and where you sit in that is different whether you're male or female. As pictured, the 200,000th best man in the world will always be massively better than the 200,000th best female, because they have a relative advantage. They will both play at about the same relative standard in their sex divisions. And that's why division based on biological sex always existed. But we can see that purely by virtue of now identifying as a woman, that biological man that was previously 200,000th in the world is now equal to the 10,000th best woman. And if sport recognises them as a woman, they aren't just equal to the 10,000th best woman, they are the 10,000th best woman. and immediately they're playing at a much higher level than their abilities should permit. Additionally, they downwardly displace every woman below them. And we can look at this another way. Imagine these pyramids represent the hierarchical structure of men's and women's sports. Again, I've placed the 200,000th best man and woman in the world on these pyramids. And again, we can see that purely by transitioning, due to the physical advantages of being a biological man, they immediately move to a much higher position in the hierarchy of female sport. They are no more talented an athlete. They are just a male competing against females. They then displace downwards every woman in the hierarchy that they were relatively worse than. And if we are of the disposition to believe that trans women can never be a biological female, which I clearly am, they displace downwards literally every woman below them. And this is absolutely demonstrable in real life. Weightlifter Gavin Laurel Hubbard being a prime example. As a 20-year-old adult male, Gavin Hubbard lifted a total of 300 kilograms. This is an okay but very average performance. I know this because it's in and around what I lifted at my best, and I was a mediocre weightlifter. It's only 62% of the current world record. If we look at the 2019 rankings, this would now place Gavin at around 60th in the world. But this is incredibly generous. International rankings only show performances of weightlifters who have competed for their nations that year. So in the very strong weightlifting nations, there will be many, many competitors who lift much more than Gavin Hubbard who are never selected for international competition. This includes nations like Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine and so forth. At the Chinese National Championships, every single competitor lifted much more than 300 kilograms. And there would have been many, many more at home that lift more than 300 kilograms but didn't qualify for nationals. So in reality, Gavin wouldn't have been 60th best in the world in 2019. He would have been well into the hundreds, maybe thousands in the rankings. However, after transitioning and with 20 years of aging, now Laurel Hubbard, a supposed woman, lifted 285 kilograms, only 5% less than they lifted as a man, and as noted, with 20 years of aging. Moreover, this 285 kilograms is now 86% of the women's world record. Compare that to the 62% when a man. A huge relative advantage gained purely from transitioning and competing as a biological male in the physical contest of women's weightlifting. And indeed, this rank average man went from being in the depths of mediocrity, ranked realistically in the hundreds or thousands, to now being ranked the 7th best woman in the whole world. As someone recently said, women's sport exists to celebrate the achievements of extraordinary women, not mediocre men. And we can take this one terrifying step further. Even with going through testosterone suppression to less than 10 nanomole per litre and with 20 years of ageing, Hubbard's performance declined by only 5%. If that is reflective of the kind of performance decrement which can be expected, imagine now the best weightlifter in the world, Lasha Talakadze, decided to transition. If his performance decreased by only 5%, he would lift 460 kilos. The current women's world record is 332 kilos. Thus, trans woman Lasha Talakadze would smash the existing women's world record by 38.5%. This is equivalent to someone coming along and beating Usain Bolt's 100-metre world record with a time of 5.9 seconds. And if after that you still don't think this is a problem, I don't know what to tell you.